Okay, so we're going to go into part two of our Python Django example. Couple weeks ago now, a couple sessions back, we got through part one. It ended up being a little more complicated than we could handle in one session. So I think we'll be able to do it in this one. There may be there's some additional things that we're not going to go as deep into that will probably do better just to be sort of standalone kinds of other areas that we may want to go into. But the goal was to basically take things that we talked about about Django and Python in a couple of prior sessions and roll them into a nice little application that we could build and work on. And so that's what we're doing here. Now, since it's been a while, we're going to start out by we'll take a look at our app so far, where we were at, sort of where we left off last time around. And then we're going to talk about Django. One of the key things here is taking the Django piece that we saw for front end for being able to use it really as a really nice object relational mapping tool and using it to do data management and things like that, and using it in a headless environment. So, flipping to the other side of doing a something without a user interface in front of it, and some of the little bits of things that you need to do there. Then we're going to focus on the backend process of our application and working through the various types of responses that we had there. And so let's talk about what we had last time around. The key to this application is it's a way to monitor sites and API endpoints. We just want something that's just a nice application that allows us to take a look at, sort of just have something that's occasionally checking, like heartbeats or values or something like that to make sure that our API is up if it's an API, our website is up if it's up, our page is returning what it's supposed to return if we've got a web page. And we looked at this with two different focuses. One would be really just more of a heartbeat or a ping. And then the other is something where would be more like an API where we want to check a value, return value. We want to do something more than just say, hey, do we get a response from a URL essentially? And we had a front end that was essentially our administration and reporting side of it, so that we could take a look at what's out there as far as, we could add a site, remove a site, edit the settings for a site. And then there's a back end that is that heartbeat thing that periodically, wakes up, runs through the checks that it needs to check, and then updates everything so we can see how our sites are going. Let's see. So I'll flip to this first if I've got it. Nope, it wasn't on this one. It is on this guy. So this is roughly what we built. Now this is a sort of the new version of it. So we're going to talk about some of the changes that have been made. But essentially what we've got these various sites that we've added, and we can see in some cases, let me just do an edit on this. In some cases, we've got something where we're looking for a value, and we've got a URL that's actually sending some parameters. And then we've got others where it's really just a ping, like the developer site. We just go out there and we just say, hey, and we're going to see, is it alive? And if it is, then it's going to give us a success or not. And normally we just see either, there's a failure or the site is alive. So let's flip back here. So that's our front end. Now the back end, obviously not as visually interesting or anything like that. But what it's going to do is we've got, for all these sites, for each of these sites or addresses that we've built, it's going to go through there. It's going to see, basically it's going to say, hey, do I need to run this? Do I need to do a check against it? And then I'm either going to do a ping or make a call to that site based on the type of here, basically the type of call that I'm doing. And then I'm going to update to make sure that I've got it's got the latest result. And then we're actually going to talk a little bit about cron versus scheduler, because we've got a couple of ways that we can do this. And Python itself is even more rudimentary than, it's not even a Django thing, it's a Python thing, is they've got a built-in scheduler tool that may work, depending on how we want to do it, may be the better approach for us. So in setting up that script, we just very briefly touched on it last time around. So this time I want to spend a little more time. We're going to talk about the basics of the script, setting up getting the Django settings into the script so that we can utilize all of that, the models and basically the database connection pieces that Django gives us for free. Since we've already got those in the Django application, we want to use those in our script. And then we'll walk through some basic queries and a simple example of running the script, what it looks like and what kinds of things are going to be going on with it. So let's jump over to some code. And let's start with, let me blow this up a little bit bigger. So actually, I'll start with just as a refresher. So the models was very simple. The database model is very simple. We have sites. So each one of those things, those boxes we saw in the interface is a site. And essentially, it's just got what we saw. You've got a name, a description, the URL that you're trying to hit, and then some information to keep track of, what was the last result? When did it last? When was it last updated? And then there's some lookup tables related to those. So it's very simple data model. And when we jump over to, I got this pop-up thing that's driving me nuts. Let's see, put that there. And so we're going to jump into our backend script. Now, the first thing that we've got is the bringing in the Django pieces. And that's actually fairly straightforward. It's not terribly complicated. If you remember, we set up here, we have Django's got a default settings file that it gives us. And then we did make some changes to it so that, for example, here, we could use a MySQL database as opposed to a SQLite that they give us by default. And then we connected it to our database for this application. And we want to use those same settings. And so in a script, it's actually pretty straightforward. There's a class that's called settings. And so we can import from Django.conf. And then this import OS gives us operating system kinds of things that we can do, some access to that. And all we need to do is we're going to come in and we're going to set the environment for the Django settings. We're going to set it equal to our project and then our settings file. And this project was called monitor. And then, and actually we can do this in any order we want to, essentially as the import, but we import the Django stuff, all of its classes and functions. We call Django setup and boom, we're off and running. So if you wanted to utilize the stuff that you set up for Django in a script, then those 5 lines will get you there. The only thing you'll have to do is just tweak it based on your application name and the settings file. And then just make sure that it's, depending on where you run the script, you may have to make sure that that's properly in the path. But that's all you need to do. It's a couple lines of code and boom, you get the whole infrastructure of Django available to you, which is key because that allows us to utilize all of those models that we use, that we built out. Now we've got a couple different imports here that I'll sort of touch on as we go. One of them is datetime and pytz. These are key Python date related stuff, for lack of a better term, not to get too technical. And what you do with those is you get the ability to work with dates, date times, do calculations and diffs between those, actually, or if you want to call it more specifically, as they do it, deltas. And you see right here is that that pytz allows you to do, it's basically Python time zone. It allows you to set a time zone so you have a context for your times, your date times and your times. And that's pretty key so that you don't end up just everything going to Greenwich Mean Time. So you can do it to match whatever your local system time is. Now the first thing we're going to do, let me make sure I want to do that. Yeah. So we've got our basics set up. We're connecting to Django. We've got some basic time stuff here. So let's look at our ping. Luckily, that is insanely easy to do, because what we're going to do is we're just going to use, in our case, we're just going to use the operating system ping. And we get that through platform. When we import platform, it's going to get us it tells us what operating system we're working on. And then subprocess allows us to actually call something. Basically, it's just, hey, make a shell command. And so all we need to do in this case for the ping is actually pretty easy. We're going to send it in an address, and then we're going to do either a -C or a -N, depending on whether it is a Windows operating system or not. And so then all we do is we just build out our command, which the command is just you give it the command. This is the operating system or the shell command. So this is, so we do ping, we're going to send a parameter, we send it a value, and then we're going to send it the host name in this case, which looks like, if you do this, it would be ping -n1, and then I could do like HTTPS on developerpreneur.com. And I probably missed something there. What did I mistype that? Oh, I think it's because it's a -1. Whoop. I bet that's it. Maybe not. So I whoops. No, so I missed one there. But basically what that does is it says, and because I think I got that, oh, that should be. There it is. I must have missed something. Oh, I'm sorry, not -C. I'm sorry. N is for Windows, C is for not. So, whoops. And basically all that does is it says ping it one time. So go out, check that one time and see if you can find it. And apparently this one, it doesn't like it right now. And so all you do there is then you're just going to return whether that call was successful or not. And so that's our ping. So when we're doing over here, we're trying to see, like, for this site, is it alive? Then all we do, and this is, we call it heartbeat. So we've got two different types. We have ping as the heartbeat, and then data return is we're going to do something more complicated than a ping. And then all we need to do is set the time amount. How often do we check? And then we're off and running. And so here we've got our ping. And now let's look down here, sort of jump to the bottom here, jump to the end in a little bit. What we do is, and this is a full script, so there's a couple things we're going to come back to. But right now, for the pings, we're going to call those heartbeats. So we're going to call this check heartbeats. And just note, I guess, that this is all, an inline script. So this is a function. We've got the ping function. We create check heartbeats function, the check request function. And then we're going to come down to the main part and we're going to check the heartbeats, check the requests. And then there's some extra stuff down here that we're going to do that we will talk about later. So let's talk about the heartbeats. And since we are using the Django models, this is really easy to do. All we're going to do is we're going to use the models. So we're going to go to our sites, which is, where did I put models? There we go. So I'm going to go into the sites and I'm going to check everywhere that ping is equal to 1, because that means that I want to try a ping. And so I'm going to grab all of them and I'm going to filter it by ping ID equals to 1. I'm going to go ahead, and this is where I'm using that UTC time. I just want to get my, what time is it now? And I'm using this date time. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a today, which is probably pretty familiar if you're dealing with date time stuff anywhere. Almost every library framework has either now or today, something like that. And so that's what we're going to do is we're going to take the today, we localize it to, because I'm on UTC, we're going to localize it to that, and that's equal to now. And so I'm just going to walk through. So I've got all my sites that were returned from this query, and I'm going to walk through each one, and I'm just going to say for each of the sites, then I'm going to see if the last time I checked it is either empty or it's equal to, or I'm sorry, actually last time I checked it plus whatever the frequency is. And the frequency is how often do I want to, what is the period of time between checks? So if it's every 5 minutes, it would say, when was the last check plus 5 minutes? Is that less than now? So is that already passed? If it's greater than that amount now, then that's in the future. So we basically say, hey, if we've never checked before, then we're going to go ahead and check. And if we have, we just want to see where that time frame sits. And if we do need to check it, so if we don't, we'll take that. That's a short path. We're just going to say we skipped it. So we'll see that come out that we just skipped that site. Otherwise, we're going to grab the host out of the data for that record, and then we're going to ping it. And all we actually don't need for the ping, which is where I had the problem before, is I don't actually do the HTTPS : // I'm going to do it without that. And so then I'm going to get my ping. And so that result, I'm going to grab the result from the ping. Oh, I'm sorry. First, I'm going to go to my various results, and basically it's either fail or the site is live. And so I'm going to go grab my fail object, because I'm actually getting result that's the result that I get back from ping is actually going to be potentially an object. And so I'm sorry, it's not, it's just a 0, 1. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if it is a 1, so if it's true, basically, then I'm going to set it equal to the live object. And this, again, remember that we're dealing with, when we're dealing with the model, the attributes are actually objects and not always, not necessarily an ID when you're working within the Django world. So I have last result. Since it is here, since it's a foreign key on lookup result, although I can go in and just do it by ID, what I really want to do is do it by class. So I'm just going to grab a lookup result value and shove it into last result. And that's what I do here is I go in and I do lookup result, and I'm going to do a get where the code is equal to live. And let me switch gears just a second here and open up the admin side. And so we can see here is that I have, for my results, there's 4 different things that are out there that I've got in that lookup table. And I don't have an actual, really, that I'd care about. I don't have an actual numeric ID, but I do have, if you guys remember, we have these unique codes. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm either going to grab the live code or the fail code. And if the result I get back from the ping is true, then it's live. Otherwise, it's going to be fail. And then all I need to do is I'm going to set the last result equal to whatever this result is. I'm going to say that the last time I checked it was now, because I just checked it, and I save that record. And all of this, I'm utilizing through these 3 things. I'm utilizing Django's model stuff to allow me to quickly, with a few lines of code, be able to do all of that. So now if we look, let me open this up just a little bit. So if I were to run this thing called monitor engine, all I need to do is, it's just a straight Python script. So I'm just going to do Python, and then I'm going to send it the script that I'm running. So when I run it, what we'll see is right now it's kicking out. I'm going to see the results. I'm sorry, since I'm sending this command, and let me see, where did I run it here? Somewhere up here. Here we go. So then what it is I'm going to see each of these pings. So I'm pinging, and I've got multiple sites. You can see here that I've got multiple sites that I'm doing checks against. Now, I think this one and this one and this one, I think I've got three are just pings. Yeah, there's 3 are heartbeats, and then 2 are going to be looking at data returned. And so if I look at those 3, Developaneur, RB Consulting, and My Time Matters, I'm going to see each of those when it's going to go out and try to hit those. And so it's actually giving me here. So let's see. So this one is developreneur.com. It does RBSNS and it does my time. And then it's going to come in and it's doing the others that we're going to look at later. Now, if I run it again, and actually, since right now I've got it scheduled to keep running, let me change that real quick. Pull this out. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So now this time, because none of these have, the time hasn't passed for each of these, then it's just going to skip each of those sites because I've already hit each of those up. So in each of these cases, we can see where the frequency was, it hasn't been long enough for me to want to do a heartbeat again. So this is where our general engine for the application is going to work, is we're going to kick this thing off and let it just run regularly, like for example, every minute. And if it runs every minute, then when it runs, it's either going to skip stuff or it's going to update some of these things. And so we can see here, like Developreneur, it just updated again. And then on our site, on our front end, we're going to see where each of these, where we get our last update. And so we can see, for like example, this one, this RB Consulting is more frequent apparently because it updated on 351 where the other ones did not. And so that's our, let me see, I think that's what I cover for this one. So that'll go. So for now, that's our initial piece here. I'm going to come back to this, but I wanted to get us through the most general version of the application, particularly the back end. So we've talked about, yeah, there we go. So we've talked about ping. And so that one was pretty straightforward. We're just going to hijack the operating system ping. So, it's already there. Why not? Now, Django or Python actually gives us a nice way to do our gets and posts and things like that. So we're going to work on a get. We're not going to get into posts and puts. We probably could if we wanted to, but it seems like that would be a little bit complicated. You probably want something you're really not going to do that as a heartbeat for a site. If you're doing puts and posts, then you're probably updating data. And although you can do that as a test, I would think you probably would not want to. So we're going to keep it simple for this type of application. And so we're going to now switch gears a little bit from the ping to get, and then with get, we're going to get a response. And we're going to look at a class in Python that allows us to work with that fairly simply and straightforward. So now, so we did our heartbeats. Let me shrink this down. Where is that at? Shrink that down a little bit. So that was heartbeats. That's going to go through everything that is looking at the heartbeat side. But now the other option we have are requests. And this is where we're going to actually be able to look at a value. So for example, we're going to have, in this case, we're just hitting our server, which is this thing. And we're going to hit it with an address that we want to actually see what is the result that's coming back. And we're going to check this every 5 minutes. Now, as an example, I want to go look at that. Let's see, create a window. If I go hit that, this is what I'm going to see normally. Got something very simple. And I built this, this and the other one. I added 2 little test URLs to my site. So HB is just this heartbeat. And this is something you may want to do for your sites. I've seen this a lot of times where instead of just essentially doing a ping to make sure something's available, and you would use this a lot where you've got, for example, like maybe an API that you want to see if the back end is up, and you've got some mobile apps that are hitting it. Then maybe the first thing they want to do is do some sort of a status check against the API in general. And so maybe you would have like a heartbeat call or something like that sends, something back. It may be just something like, hey, I'm alive. Sometimes you'll see, and you'll get this, actually you can go out to some major APIs and they actually have status pages. And so they may break this down. So it may be, the site is responding, and they may have, front end is up, back end is up, migration tools are up, something backup is down, something like that, is that you may have actually something pretty complicated that you'd want to check against. And so we, just to sort of give an example of that, as opposed to having to build out, walk through a little API example, I just added these into this site. So it's pretty easy for us to play around with them for setting up stuff locally. So I did HB, and then I did this other one that's just M, which takes two values and multiplies them. And so that one here, let me go back here. So what I did to test it is I'm just going to give it 3 times 6, and then the value should be 18. And this would be much more like an API kind of call, where I would do something like this, and then I should get a value back. So I've added those two in for us to play around with this second piece. And so now let's take a look at that. And just actually, I guess just for clarity, we'll just walk through those real quick. Let's see. So heartbeat. I think we've talked about this before, but in both these cases, all I'm doing is I'm not going to our normal, normally what we're going to do is we're going to build some values out, and we go to our HTML, essentially our template pages. So if I look at this page in the Django world, it's site list. So if you remember, I've got this thing where I've got these content blocks, and then I've got some HTML that I'm basically building based on that. And in this case, go back to my views. Here we go. In this case, instead of rendering as we do with the HTML, I'm just going to build out a raw HTTP response. And we see that when I did the heartbeat, is all I did is I just sent it a string and it kicked it back. And in the multiplier, I've got my two values and I just multiply those out. Now I can do something, complicated. I can do hello world. And if I change that and go back to heartbeat, then now I'm just sending, and it's just like you can see, it's just raw HTML. Of course, now if I do that and I run my monitor, then I'm going to see here that heartbeat failed. And this is something actually that I'm going to talk about in a second, but we did change this up a little bit. We cleaned this up because last time these were just straight backgrounds. So actually now I've got something that's a little more colorful. We'll take a look at that in a second, or a few minutes as it were. And let me kill that so that doesn't just continue to run. And now so we can build our response and we can do whatever we want to as part of that response. It's really nice for, again, we don't need to have a full-blown, an actual API, although we have looked at that in the past. We can do something like this and just, have some values, some URLs that we build rather quickly. It's just, hey, this is what I want the URL to look like. And then we can, force a response out that doesn't have to be, we don't even have to build our HTML page. We can just do something, just a straight response. So let's go back to our primary engine here. Now before, if ping is equal to 1, and this is the ping ID, which I could have grabbed the ping value, but I just kept it. This is an example where we can send a class like we did here, or I can just go in and say, just directly, I'm going to cut to the chase and I'm going to send an ID. And I know that my two IDs, and I'll look at those real quick. So the ping types are either data returned or heartbeat. Heartbeat has an ID of 1. You can barely see it there, which technically I would never need to see. I probably should do it by heartbeat code here, like I did with my lookup result. But I just wanted to show that it's cleaner to use it by code and more resilient, because if for some reason the actual ID of that record changes, then that would break it. But I wanted to show that you can actually just directly, instead of doing it by ping, I can use an underscore ID and then just send an ID value across. Let's see. And so here we go. So check requests. before I did it where the ID is equal to 1. This time, sort of the same thing. I'm going to grab my sites where now, instead of the heartbeat, I'm doing the value. I still use that now that I used before. So I get the current timestamp. What is it today, right now? And then I'm going to walk through each site. And essentially the same thing. I'm going to say, hey, if I haven't checked it, or, well, that's neat. I didn't need that. I don't know why I doubled that up, but there you go. If the last check was was more recently than I want to do my period of checks, then I'll skip it. I'm sorry, or if it is within the frequency, so if it's longer than the last frequency or it's empty, I'm going to do something. Otherwise, I'm just going to say skipped it, which we saw before. Now, before we had the ping, this one's actually not much more complicated. Now here, I've got some prints to show the result text and status code, which I think we can see here. So for the ones that we've seen, so like here, if you can see the latest one I did, is it actually kicked out. This was the text of the result. And this is the HTTP response. And so I can check for things, because it could be like here, it's a 200, but it could be a 400, a 401, a 500, all those other typical responses. Now I can, if I want, I can say that for these value checks, that I want to make sure that I do have a 200 plus a value, but I'm keeping it pretty simple in this case. And I'm just going to say that if it's not a 200, because we're just doing it's basically, it's either yes, we're getting something, or no, we didn't. So one of the things we're going to do is first we're going to see, well, actually I sort of messed with this one a little bit, but this one, first we're going to see is the result here. So I'm going to get result is the actual result. By default, I'm going to assume it's a fail. Otherwise, if the desired result is equal to 3, and this is where I've got two different versions of this value check. So it's either the simple response or the value response. The simple response says, is it a 200? The value response says, I'm going to give you a value and I want to check against that. And we see that, let me go back to my admin. And so here for heartbeat, this is a value I'm checking against. If I wanted it to just be a simple response, then even though I have a value, it's not going to care what that value is. And so it allows us, we've got a heartbeat, which is a ping. We've got a get, which is the simple response. And then we've got the value response that says, not only am I going to do a HTTP get, a web get, I'm also going to check a value that's returned.
Hey, Rob, quick question.
Yeah.
Go back to your other screen for a moment.
The listing screen?
Yep.
This one?
No, right there.
Okay.
So I'm assuming there's a way in Django to do this, but is there a way that it, based on your dropdown, it will hide or show that desired value?
What do you mean? It's so that, I see. Oh, so like if I do this, it would either hide or show this field?
Right.
Yes. And it's not actually that's actually at that point, it's not a Django thing. It's really, it would be a standard JavaScript thing. So what I would do, and this, that does get a little bit tricky because I think this is let me go back to that. That's a good side question. If I go to the list, I think I'm using a form. No, I'm not. Let's see. Am I using a form? No, I'm not. So what I would do.
Okay, but you would do is you would, okay, so I get it now. So you update it here based on, so this would check, yeah, there it is. Okay, so you got if code in there. All right.
Yeah.
I was trying to follow this earlier and you kind of went a little fast through, but I see it now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so what I could do, is, and I don't think I had any of that built in, but yes, so I could do that and just say based on that value that these things are going to be visible or not. And Django doesn't give us anything special on that, but it's actually, now we're just down to, standard web stuff at that point. So good question.
Right.
And that,
Yes. So it kind of looks like it's so the way Django does the web displays is kind of like a JSP or the JSTL tags.
precisely is it's really there. It gives you your more like a template essentially, and it gives you some, like JSP or ASP or any of those. It gives you a way to do some tags, but then the rest of it is you're building it into your page itself, and you can build, and then you can include, like here, you can build, you can include JavaScript as needed, and it's just gonna, it's gonna spit out your HTML on the back end.
Okay, cool. Thanks. That answered my question.
Oh, good question. All right, so back to that. So we've got our two different things. We're either going to say, if my result, and this is, again, that's a good example here of where, while I can use my IDs, it is so much easier to read if I'm building it based on like a readable code value. So desired result equals to 3. Actually, if we look here, is going to be, I think that's the value response. Yeah, is value response. So it would be easier if I was actually doing code, I would at least see value, or I could do it by the name. So that's something much more developer friendly, instead of what is almost effectively a magic number, because it's like, I don't know what an ID3 is unless I'll go back and look at the database. So while it may be a shortcut in a sense for me to do this as an ID, it really is not as good maintainability wise. And it is a little, I guess it is a little bit faster because I'm not grabbing that object. So there is a cost there, but you could do some of this stuff where I don't have to, I could actually get a couple of these objects and cache them off at the start. But I digress. So here we are either going to check the value, in which case we've got the two things we can look at is we either have result status code, which gives us the status code, which is, 200, 400, 401, 500, 501, or whatever. We can check against our status code, and we can say, if we're checking that, we just say, if it's a 200, then we're live. That's what we're using for our evaluation. Otherwise, we don't care what the status code. We actually care what the text is that's sent. And then we want to make sure that, and we want to make sure that that text is equal to the text that we say it should be. In which case, let's go back over here. This is the text that we say it should be. That is our desired value. And then we go back to the same thing we did with the ping. Is that, again, it's like, okay, whatever the last result is going to be either live or failed based on what we got. We're going to set our last check time to now, and then we're going to save it, and then we're off and running. So now, and this goes back to what we had before. Let me get rid of this guy real quick. And so now what we're going to be able to see, let me get that, is that we're going to go through and we're going to check for, where did I run that here? So I ran it, and I'm going to do, it's going to do a ping. It's going to do another ping. It's going to do another ping. And then it's going to come through. It's going to walk through and do the heartbeats. But since I've got no printouts based on that right now, it's only going to tell me if it skips it. So here, if I run it again, then we're going to see where I have my 3 pings, and then I have my 2 others, and it's going to run those, but it skipped those because it caught them last time. So let's take another step on our interface and talk about that a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about the Python scheduler to just essentially to clean this up. Because right now, the way we've got it, you can see, as I have to manually run this engine each time, or create a cron job that manually runs it, each time. And the interface that I'm showing you right now is not quite, was not what we had. So I want to talk a little bit about how I've updated this. Let's make sure. Yeah, so everybody's running right now. And so I'm going to do a page refresh on this page so that I don't have to do a force a refresh every time to see how my sites are doing. I'm going to change some background colors and look a little bit about that in the and how we can do that in CSS. It's a little bit of a slide trip, but just to show a nice, easy way to do this from CSS. And then we're going to talk about scheduler. The nice thing about schedule, we're going to see it's really easy. It's very easy to set up. It's really easy to create a job, schedule the job, and then run it and sleep as needed. It's like cron, but it's probably even easier to understand than cron. So it makes it a really nice tool, which is why I want to make sure I cover that within this application. And it does sort of round out everything. So when we're done today, we'll have an application that we could spin up and run and set up some sites that we want to work with. And we've got a little monitor app going. So one of the first things, and this goes back a little bit to the question we just had, is one of the things I want to do, with my site is make it so that this thing doesn't force me to do a refresh, is I want to just do an auto refresh. And this is not a new trick, but one that I want to make sure that I mention to everybody. So this is my site list page. This is site list. Sites goes to sitelist.html. And if I want to do a refresh, it is literally that simple, is that you can tell your page to do a refresh. You tell it how many seconds, how frequently you want to do it, and then you're off and running. So if I want to do it every second, then I'm going to have to refresh it once so I get that new value. And now you're actually going to see, maybe you can see here, it's actually refreshing every second. So if I go in and run and I can see here's the back end where I can see it's just making this call. It keeps making this call. And if I turn on the update, then what I'm going to see is now there's probably a couple. Yeah. So like here, it's already changed its time. And if I wait for a minute or two, it's going to pick that back up. So let me turn that off. So it's not doing it every 15 seconds or every second. Because honestly, and actually I can do it every 30, because the most frequent check we have in our application is 1 minute. So I'm going to do it every 30 seconds. I'm going to do an update. I could do it every minute, but every 60 seconds, but I may miss one. So I figure, I'll just do it every 30 seconds for now. And it's a local app, so it doesn't matter too much. So in doing that, and now since it was updating every second, it hit an update. Now it's going to update every 30 seconds. And I'm going to see at some point, I'm going to see these guys update. So that's a refresh on the page. Another thing I want to do is be able to change these so I can see if something is up or down. So let me actually, let me break a couple of these. So I'm going to say 3 times 6 is 19. And I'm going to say HB, I'm going to give it something else to check for. So those two are going to start to fail on me. And what I want to do is I can see, let me go back here. As right now I see green, but what I want to do is be able to see, have something that's red if something's down. And I could change these colors to a lot of different things, which basically is either going to be here. It's either the normal one that I've got for my style sheet or my class. It's either site or site down. That's just the two things. Either it's up or it's down. Now, all of these right now are up. At some point, it's going to check these two guys and they're going to go down. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is CSS, where did I put my CSS? Here we go. And actually, it's site and site. It's actually site up and site down. So let's just do that. Let's see if I go back here. Oh, I think I had it. Oh, I'm sorry. I have that it's either site up or site down. And then I think if I create a new one, it's going to actually pick up the site itself. So if I create a new one, so here I can see now these two are down because I broke those values. If I add a site, I'm just going to add a site real quick. That is heartbeat. If I just do that. And I want to do this minutes. Simple response. There we go. So here it hasn't checked it. So I can see this guy actually is going to be, he's got no color. So this means I've never checked it. This means it's alive. This means it's failed. And so I've got 3 different statuses basically for a site right now that's based on color. And so that is either site up, site down, or just the default site. And we had already the default site that we had that thing built up. And so all I do with site up is it's going to be, I can essentially just copy and paste it, and I'm just changing some colors. So I can see here, let's see, that the background color, I changed that over. And if you see, oh, this one's now down, but before the text was, it was a light, I had a gray with a black text as the primary color. Well, when I flip it, I want to change the text to white so it shows up in that green or that red. And so really all I have to do is change background color here. And let's see, whoops. And so that's for site up, site down. I'm going to make it red. And boom, I'm off and running. As any one of these, I can pick that up. And so now we've got a little bit more visual, interface. You get a little better user experience because now I'm seeing those colors in there. And like I said, again, this is where if you do stuff following your standards, throw some, use your CSS classes like we did, from the start, we had, on the site list, from the start, we had the site class so that we were able to do some styling on these. And so once we've got that, then, we're off and running. Now I do want to say that I think I had site, and I think I had another one. Let's see if I look at site box, I got a site hover. Yeah. So I had site hover, and you may have seen that actually does a little bit of shading. And what I can do is I can actually do that. Take that same thing. Actually, I'm going to move this here. And if I want to get my site hovers for those, then I can do site up and site down. I'm going to do the same thing. And I did like a site. Yep. And it's just a straight. So I can come up here and I'm going to do the same thing for site up. And whoops, and site down. And right now I can see that nothing happens on my hover. Oh, in this case, because it's a CSS, it's a static change, and I need to restart my server. So it's going to pick that back up. And now I should see on a hover, but you can't really see it. Let me make sure I got that right. Site up hover, hover, site down hover, site down hover. And I think I did not. Oops. Let's make sure I've got that right. I may not be refreshing it right. Oh, because it's not going to, my mistake. I need to jump to a new window because it's already cached that. So let me instead move to a private window so it doesn't hold it. And this should pick that up. Do my login. Got to enter my password right. And so now you probably can, I don't know how well you can see it, but whoop, now it's going to pick up my hovers here. So all that real quickly through CSS, which again goes back to just like one of those nice little things that says, hey, make sure where you can use CSS classes, and it makes your interface is a little cleaner. You don't have all these like special, fonts and other things that you need to do. Just drive it through classes. And then when you want to change the look and feel quickly, then you can do it here. So if I wanted to do, like real quick and say that I don't like red, I'm going to make it blue if it's down. And then I come in, let's see, I'm not sure if it'll do it. Yeah. And then I force a refresh, and then boom, I can change that, in a matter of seconds, quite literally. And when you're dealing with changing requirements and things like that, then I would say definitely do that so that you can handle. It's amazing how helpful that is with a customer that's constantly changing their minds. And you can show them that almost, live. You can actually walk through and do a joint session with them and say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. And so that brings us to the last piece I want to talk about is the scheduler itself. And so one thing we did not do in the prior that we would have to do is pip3. Pip is if you remember, it's the package manager for Python. And so what we need to do is we're going to have to add schedule. So if we do pip3 install schedule, pip3 being Python 3's version of it, in this case, it's going to say that it's already satisfied. If you run it, it'll install it. If you don't, it'll say that it's not going to be able to find the schedule piece. And that allows us to do import schedule. So I'm going to move these back up to the top of the page here to sort of get all of my imports together. Let's see. And so I didn't have time twice. Oh, I did have time twice. So I already had time here, and actually date's not being used. So I'm going to get rid of that. So I can clear that up. So all you have to do is import schedule and jump to the bottom here. And schedule works off of jobs. And so I'm going to define, and I'm just going to call it job. And now instead of here, you can see where I had my heartbeats and my check requests. This was what I had as my main. So what I'm now going to do instead is I'm going to say that my job is checking those two, and it's going to print out job complete, just so that every time I run the job, I'm going to see that, hey, I ran the job. Now I can either do it. It's doing so once I've defined what my job is, what is the function I want to run, schedule says, allows me to say, all right, well, every time period, I can either say every 1 minute, I could say every 60 seconds, I could say every hour, every 24 hours. All I'm going to say is do job. And it's much like you probably have seen if you've done like multi-threaded stuff in the past or something like that. You define something, as we do here, and then you say run it. What schedule does is says run it every time frame, run that thing. And so it's going to schedule that. It's going to go in and run it. And then all I need to do is I have this little loop that says that if I've got something that is waiting to be run, then it's going to run it. And so that's what schedule does is it basically queues it up. And then I need to do run pending to say run everything that's pending. So I could, conceivably, depending on how we do it, I could have something like, I could have a couple of different things that run, maybe one every 1 minute, every 2 minutes, another one runs every 5, one runs every 10 hours. And then I could basically say, well, but worst case, I only want to run any of those every 5 minutes. And so what I would do is I can say run pending, run every job that's out there that needs to be run. And then sleep here is I'm going to say just, since I don't want to keep seeing if something's pending, then I'm going to just sleep for a minute and come back and check it. So that right there, I created my job, my thing that I'm going to do. And then schedule itself is just a couple lines of code and I'm off and running. Now, the way this script runs is it runs through, it says, okay, first time I fire up, I'm just going to go ahead and run these two functions up above, which is basically the job. So I could just now, actually in the main part of the script, instead of doing it this way, I could just say here, I could just say job. So I'm going to define it and I'm going to run it. And then I'm going to schedule it and I'm going to run anything that's pending. I can do that. Or I can just say, forget that. I'm not even going to run it. Then I'm just going to come through here. I'm going to define it. I'm going to queue it up and then I'm going to run it. And so what we'll see here, and we've seen this actually as we've been running through this today. If I run, let me do this. Let me clear that so it's a little easier to see. When I run it, did I miss something there? Date time has no attribute sleep. So, I'm sorry, because I had a date time, but I also had up here It was just called import time itself was the one that it's a different time. Where was that? There we go, import time. Okay, so that's what I thought it was. My mistake, but there is actually, I needed time itself, because you can do the time function from date time, but there's also the time library, which can sometimes be a little bit complicated, but the one allows me to do sleep. Let's see. Yeah, so now I'm going to come in here. So what happens when you change stuff on the fly? So now, oh, it's because I need to, my mistake. And because I have those two, it's going to be whichever one I call last is going to be the problem. I wonder if I'm using the date time at all. I think I'm actually good. So I think I can actually get rid of that one. Let's see. This is why usually you don't want to do it on the fly, but let's see if this will work for me. There we go. Okay. So I've queued it up, and now it's going to wait, and then it's going to end up waking up, and it's going to run the pending job. Now notice this time I didn't run it right away. I could have, which a lot of times is what you're going to do is you'll just say, like here, I would just come in and say, hey, job, run it. And then here, it's just going to do while true. So I don't have anything that is going to end this. I can, I'm basically going to have to either kill it, or I can actually background it and let it run in the background. And periodically, it's going to show me the updates. And I'll flip back to this in a second. But that brings us to a point here where we can sort of wrap it up a little bit and go to Q&A while I go flip back over there. Let me see, is it run yet? Nope, hadn't run yet. So using the ping and the request classes, we talked about those. Those allow us to do that ping or a get. We looked at some of this dynamic application of styles. So we had the classes for up or down that we could see here. We get those different colors. We looked at the scheduler itself, and then we looked at a page auto refresh. And so with those, that gives us our back end, a little bit of a cleanup. And now we've got a very simple little application that we could run, however we want to do it. I guess I could probably shrink this down a little bit even. We could have this thing running, in the background somewhere, either on our, or we could have this, actually, it could be a nice little thing if you wanted to do a page essentially on your site, whatever your site happens to be. You could hook up a couple of these things and have it one of those, status kinds of things that you typically see. For example, I think like maybe AWS status will have it. Yeah. So you could see something like, you could build something like this essentially. And you could do this and tweak it for your specific site so that you could, or for your look, so that you could have, instead of the UI that I provided here, you could do something like that. That basically lists it. So that allows you a quick and easy way to do that. Let's see, it ran, I think. So we can see here, yes, so it ran. So we've got this scheduled thing. It ran through, but we also can see where it came back around and it skipped a bunch of those sites. And then it just tells us job complete. And then it's going to keep running in the background. So now we have our back end running in the background. We have our, whoops, that's not our foreground. Let me kill that off anyways. Where did that go? We have our foreground doing its every 30-second refresh. And so now we don't have to touch anything, and it's going to tell us if a site goes down. And there we go. So questions and comments?
What interests me so much about, and first off, a great presentation and also lots of thoughts that come from it. But what interests me so much is that, we have the power as developers to really sure up a site in a way that most canned WYSIWYGs or whatever don't usually have, right out of the box. I'm also thinking about, this gives me so many ideas of shoring up, the distributed architecture with different types of techniques, pinging different services, running messages through the pipeline to kind of then intercept, it going out of the top of the funnel type thing. just to confirm everything's up and running. That's really cool, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a really common thing that's out there that I don't think we usually don't think about it too much until something breaks, and then you're like, oh, man, I could have probably done something. And this actually, I mean, I ended up building this concept of an app a long time ago because I just had a couple of sites, and this was back when it was a lot harder to have a site that stayed up. You know, it's just more common something would happen to break a site. And instead of me, I sort of got in a habit of every day, like when I'd start my day, I'd go walk through my 3 or 4 little sites to see if they were up and make sure that my website wasn't down. And I said, well, that's sort of ridiculous. And so what I did is I just, built a little app that did it. And you can do, you could actually expand from this really easily and quickly. You could do something like if the site goes down, if I do a check and a site's failed, then I also send an email out that says, hey, your site's down. I thought about adding that into this, but it would have gotten a lot longer, and we could have gotten a lot more complicated. And I wanted to keep this a simple app, but I think you can already see it. There's a lot of things that you can do, even with this, to just have a quick way to monitor what's up, what's down. And like I said, it'd be really easy to add some notifications on top of it as well. And it's just, to me, it's a good example of where within, probably, I don't know, overall, maybe an hour or two, and you can have a full featured application using Python and Django that has all of these pieces, and you're ready to go. So it's not even a prototype necessarily or something like that. I mean, you've got a full app that you can run quickly. You got a database behind it. You've got tools to administer the data, everything you possibly need. So good. Other questions and comments?
No, this is really good, Rob. I like the quick and ease and the administration side of it, because with the polling and that, I could potentially use this to build the front end for my test generator tool so that you can build the test cases and actually run them from the GUI instead of having to actually write the script.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I think I don't know if you've seen this, but that's actually one of the nice things that, and I may show this at some point, because we did look at we did a little bit with Python testing, but it also, with Selenium, which you've talked about, it does allow us, it has a Python test export as well. HTTPS developer. Oops, I need one there. There we go. That I can do. Let me just click on a couple of things real quick. Oh, I'm not recording, or am I? Yes, I am recording. So I can take, I think this probably enough of you have seen this before, is I can take the normal stuff I do with Selenium, and it does have an export to Python's PyTest, which is insanely, let's see, that's in downloads. I'll just show that real quick, because I've actually been playing around with this lately for some scraping type stuff I did that made it so insanely easy using Selenium stuff. As you can see, that it's actually, it generates a real simple Python script, depending on how you do it. And it uses the same stuff that you've seen. I know that Michael's talked about it, extensively, as far as the web drivers that are out there. Once you've got it, Python is a tool that has built a nice framework to work with that. It's one of those, just like Java and C# that you could do something much more complicated. Is I could actually use this. I mean, this is from scratch, but I could, and uses the PyTest stuff, but I could actually basically steal this code, build a WebDriver, and I could actually use that as part of my monitoring. As I could get something, pretty complicated. I can also, like you said, I mean, I could build something that runs my test scripts and then reports it back somewhere, and then just ping that, periodically to see if the tests failed. Or I could even return it. I could add to it. There's some other things I could do. Right now, we just do pass or fail. I could, within this, I could actually grab the value that's returned in these, like in this case, where I'm looking at what the value is that's returned. Oh, let me save that. Oh, save that off. And I could actually do something to display that. So I could actually have that display here, maybe like last return value or something like that. So you can do a lot quickly, like I said, and it does have that's why I liked this as an application, as an example, is it just gives you a nice starting point where there's a lot of things that you could leap from this platform to. Excellent. Other questions and comments? All right, hearing none. That brings us to the end yet again. So as always, appreciate the time, the feedback, the interaction, all of the time that you spent. I know that we spend it, it is self-focused to an extent because we want to make ourselves better and our career better, but it is all that time spent is also great as far as the group is concerned. We get some, having the comments and the discussions, it helps all of us grow. If you have any questions about this or need any additional information, as always, email info@developreneur.com is out there. We have the contact us form on developreneur.com. We've got our YouTube channel. The easiest way to go out there is just YouTube and if you do Developreneur, it will get you to the Developreneur channel. We've got a lot of stuff out there. We've got literally, I think we're up to like 200 videos or something like that right now. I mean, it's just like, it's growing by leaps and bounds. We're definitely over 100. And then the Vimeo, we still update that somewhat regularly. Most of the new stuff, the most part, is going to YouTube, but these classes, the mentor sessions, still show up on the Developreneur channel on Vimeo as well. And then we'll eventually end up on YouTube. And of course, we've got the Building Better Developers podcast. The easiest way to get to that is, you can do your favorite podcatcher, whatever it happens to be. Or if you've got Alexa, you can just say, Alexa, enable Building Better Developers, and boom, it will go out there and grab it for you, get the latest episode of that. As always, our goal is making every developer better. We appreciate the time you spend doing that, and go out there and have yourself a great day.